Boom. And there we go. We are live, ladies and gentlemen, for another exciting Tuesday, 8 a.m. bench stream. Hold on. I had an echo going on here. Wait, I still have it. There we go. Okay. I don't know why that's suddenly a problem. Been a problem in the last two streams we did. But anyway, what are we going to be doing today? Over on the bench, I have guitar number 116, the guitar that will never leave my shop, no matter how hard I try. It just seems there's always more that has to be done to this guitar. Whether it's me screwing something up and having to cycle back through it, or just not being able to get to the guitar because of all the busyness, the other work that I have going on here. So anyway, we're going to make a very serious, earnest effort to get this guitar done. Well, it's not going to be done on this stream, but today or the next day, I think it will certainly be done. It has to be done because it is going to a show. There's a guitar show, the Lehigh Valley Guitar Show on Saturday, August 1st, so this weekend. And I'll be there. So if you're in the area, this one is actually right down the road from me, which never happens. I usually have to travel for these shows. So that's pretty cool. It's going to be in Leesport, which is right between Robesonia and where my old shop was in Burnville. So anyway, come check that out. I believe it starts at 11 a.m., but you can look that up, Lehigh Valley Guitar Show. Okay. And maybe it's not too late if you guys want to get a booth there and be a vendor as well. You could probably give them a call and still, from my experience with these shows, they always say like whatever, we're running out of tables or whatnot, but that's never true. You can always get more tables last minute. So yeah, if you guys want to come out, show your wares, your guitars, that'd be really cool. Tom Casty's in the chat. Tom Casty writes, "Good morning, Eric. Video and sound is good." Yes, he's anticipating my usual question, line of questioning, which is, hey, is this working? Is the video good? Is the sound good? So I appreciate that, Tom. Hey, Tom, actually, I want to tell you something. You in particular, we are live streaming now. This is the first time on Twitch. And I know that probably you are probably the only member of this audience that is actually on Twitch. Twitch, if you don't know, is a big, it's a specifically a live streaming platform. It's not like another YouTube where they do videos, like pre-recorded videos. It's just live streaming, and it's largely, as far as I can tell, it's largely for like gamers and people like that. But also a lot of musicians use it, like Tom's nephew, Tommy Anella, use it to live stream their shows and things like that. Okay. All right. Well, that is enough rambling because I have a lot of work to do. So I'm going to jump over to the bench and we'll get started over there. Let's see what camera I want to use. I think we're going to start with something like this. All right. Let me pull Tom off the screen. Okay, guys. So what are we looking at? We've got guitar number 116. Let me describe a couple of things that I just did to this and some new things that I've done here that I've really, really appreciated. So the other day, finished buffing out the finish, and it actually came out really good for once. I always feel like finish is such a crapshoot, but the buff out process came out really good on this one. I leveled the finish before buffing with micro mesh, starting at 2400 grit micro mesh and going all the way up to 12,000 grit micro mesh. And after that, I did another very thin cut with 50% mineral spirits. What's it called? Flash coat, maybe is the word. There's some word for that. But, a hyper thin final coat. I think that's called a flash coat on the guitar of True Oil. And then let it sit for a week and finally buffed it out with Megwar's Swirl Remover. It's an automotive compound, Megwar's, however you pronounce that. I could be saying it wrong, Meguiars. Fantastic stuff. Really great stuff. And then followed that up with a wax, also by Meguiars, Meguiars Show Car Glaze, it's called. And that really did a fantastic job at bringing out the final gloss to it. I can't say enough good things about Meguiars, about those two products. I hadn't used them before. I used them on a recommendation, and I think they worked. They really worked. They worked really well, so I'm going to continue using them. And put a pick guard on here. Got to have a pick guard, right? And man, I got to say, it's quite possibly my least favorite part. Actually, I wouldn't say that. There's other parts of the build that I don't like, that I don't really enjoy. It's not that I don't enjoy putting on the pick guard, but man, doesn't matter how many times you do it, it's always an intense moment. It's nail bitey, right? You can easily put this thing on a little bit wrong, a little bit askew, and actually it is slightly askew, but I'm okay with it. You could put it on a little bit askew, or even worse, end up with ripples or bubbles in it that you just can't get out. You know, in its simplest, in theory, let's say, you're just putting on a big sticker. That's it. It should be the easiest thing. And actually, I think just regular guitar players that want to put a different type of pickguard on their guitar, they buy pickguard material and put it on there all the time. And to them, they're just putting on a big sticker. But I think, and it's probably not very concerning for them. But I think as professional luthiers, as boutique guitar builders, we, get everything just so and so precise that viewing it as just putting on a big sticker doesn't work for us. So there's lots of little micro things about it that can look off-putting if you do it wrong, and especially with these clear pick guards, which I don't have to use. They're more difficult, but when they're done correctly, I just really enjoy them. I think that looks better. It's more subtle. You can see the grain through the pick guard. And also, Mylar is the thinnest material you could possibly use for a pick guard. I mean, this thing is, I'm just guessing, like 5/1000ths of an inch. I did actually measure it at one point with calipers years ago. I think I talked about it on the video, but I don't remember. So very, very thin, thinner than any other type of pick guard that you would put on a guitar. So you're also getting the sort of tonal benefit of less is more. But let me talk a little bit. Actually, let me grab my pickguard tools. I keep a special bin with just my pickguard material separate from everything else because this specific task is so finicky that I don't trust myself to use the same tools, like specifically the razor blade that I use for other things, because I need it to be damn sharp for just this single cut here. And I'll explain why in just a moment, but let me grab those. Oh, I get to push the button. Look, there's the downstairs. That's where I'm going. Actually, you won't see me because I'll be in the side room. All right, back. 10 seconds. Oh, I'll bring a couple things up here, actually. So I brought the micro mesh up too, actually. Oh, let's bring the camera back. Wrong camera. Let's go overhead for now. All right, so first of all, I just want to show you some of the micro mesh here. It's funny, I got a comment on my YouTube videos recently about it was a worded as a piece of advice, which sure, I guess it is a piece of advice, but it was not to assemble tools or handle tools as I do over top of your guitar, which I do that all the time because I make these live stream videos. So kind of have to do that. Anyway, I just thought that was funny. I don't mind the comment, obviously, but yeah, I understand the risk I'm taking by holding heavy or sharp tools over top of my nice workpiece. But this is not heavy or sharp. These are just little baggies. I just want to give you guys a little breakdown of what before I get into the pick guard thing, a breakdown of what I was talking about with the finish as far as leveling the finish. So what I do, there's a lot of steel wool fibers over here that are a little concerning to me. Let me pick those up Can't have that. Not at this stage. No, sir. No, thank you. I do not want to screw up the finish or anything else. Okay. So what I like to do is, first of all, I've got micro mesh for the frets, which I also use this on the frets here. I tape off the board, and I started at the beginning of the grit here, which is all the way down at 1500. Went from 1500 all the way up to 12,000 for the fretboard, but I have a different set of micro mesh in different plastic bags for the fret wire, so that those ones don't touch finish. And then all my finish ones, which are these, I keep them in each grit in a separate plastic bag. And once I'm done using it, it goes right in that plastic bag. Keeps everything clean, and it keeps everything organized so I know what it is and they're very clearly marked. Otherwise, I mean, when you just have these in a pile, the color system that they have for these is kind of weird. It's not that great. And what I mean by that is, if you look at 1500 and 3600, they're almost the same color. Now, fortunately, that's a pretty dramatic grit difference, so you can feel the difference when you touch the pads. But you know, we just don't want to make those mistakes. So this is a nice way to keep everything clean. And then you'll notice there are these smaller shaped pads in here. So these are the ones that you buy. You can get them from StuMac. And also, I think these originally come from Nail, you know, where women go to get their nails did from a nail salon. So if you look online at suppliers for nail salons, I think you can find these micro mesh. I don't know if you can get them in these 2-inch by 2-inch square pads though, which I do like that shape. Let's see. So I just got a bunch of these. I did get them from StuMac, and one pad for each of these grits, I cut these 2 triangles off of the sides, and actually all of these are useful to me. The triangles are for getting into very tight inside corners with the finish, and this little stick one here is very useful for all these areas around the headstock. Anywhere where if I were to level with this larger pad, I would be wrapping inadvertently around that thin edge. This is much more appropriately sized for that thin edge. So anyway, what I would recommend is that if you guys are leveling with micro mesh, that you get an extra piece and you cut it up into maybe the shapes you want to use for your instrument are slightly different than mine, but I find just cutting those 2 triangle shaped bits off the edges and then keeping the middle for this section is very useful. So here, I'll just show you that one more time just so you can see it's very simple. This is how it originally looked. And then you cut these 2 wings off and keep all 3 pieces. All right, how are we doing in the chat? All right. Hi, Eric. Welcome to Twitch. Oh, look at that. Okay, cool. So what happened is Tom Cassidy popped over to his Twitch account and is now also communicating. He's communicating to us from YouTube, but also from Twitch. So that actually is really cool. Thank you, Tom, because that tells me that I'm live there. Very cool. I guess I could pull it up right now and see myself, but I do have it open right here. Yeah, that's cool. Okay. There's like a slight delay to it, but I'm sure that's normal. All right. Tom Cassidy asks, is 1 week enough time to wait after the last coat of True Oil before buffing? I would say so. This is one of those things that, you know, your mileage may vary, I guess, because everybody does this a little bit differently. Some people, I've heard of people waiting like 3-4 weeks. I think that's crazy. I mean, it's not crazy. It's fine. It doesn't hurt. You could wait 2 years and that would be fine. But at some point, it just doesn't matter anymore, right? That's really the spirit of your question. I find that a week is totally fine. I used to do 2 weeks for the longest time, and my impatience eventually drove me to just like, okay, let's try 1 week. Now, with that said, I have a very well controlled humidity in my shop. Okay. It is, at least now it is. It used to be pretty bad, but I control it very well. So it really never goes above like 45. Never. So it never gets super wet in here. It can get a little bit dry, but not super wet. And it's that high humidity that really slows down the cure time. And so if you're hanging up your guitar, let's just say like in your garage or your basement, basements are notoriously wet. That time could be dramatically different. And I think that's where the 2 weeks and 3 weeks comes from, is just that advice comes from just people are doing this, all over the world in different conditions. And the, I guess, safest, most practical advice for everyone, if you are doing it in a basement or a garage with no controls, would be to give it that extra week or two. But yeah, if you're feeling kind of daring and you think your humidity is under control, try 1 week, and I think you will find that it works just fine. All right, let's go back to the bench. Not that camera. Let's try this one. All right, so there's the micro mesh, pretty cool. Oh, I should show, well, I can't show you guys, I don't have a camera for it, but I should show you guys the finishing room. At least I'll tell you about it. The reason I went downstairs to go get this stuff is because I just built a finishing room. Actually, I did show you this in the last stream. Not in the stream, but in the final edited video. I took a picture of it and put it in there. So I just built a finishing room so that now I don't have guitars. And this is kind of how my old shop was. So that's where I got the inspiration. Now, when I get to the finishing stage, I can take the guitars to a completely different place and just take my time working them through all the coats and the leveling and the buffing and everything without completely shutting down everything else I'm doing in the shop. Huge advantage having just a separate place for finishing, because finishing just, it takes over and it lasts forever. It never ends. Okay, so in this lovely tub here, this is specifically my pickguard box. And so I have all these pieces of Mylar in here. This is what the material looks like. It comes with the adhesive and the backing on it, and you just cut these out. You can see I've cut out all kinds of shapes here. I've got a couple different pickguard shapes for different models. The Parlors are these really small ones, and all the other guitars get this larger shape here. So I made these little templates here. This one that looks like a pork chop, and this one, I don't know what that looks like. Looks like a pickguard. And so I highly recommend, by the way, it's fun to do and it's not hard. Take some French curves. I highly recommend creating your own pickguard shapes to match the sweep of the curves on your guitars rather than simply using the available pickguards that are out there. You can do that, it's fine, probably not too noticeable, but it's not terribly difficult to design something that looks cool for your guitars. And then just cut out a template out of acrylic like I have here. Okay, now the key to this, to getting this damn sticker on there without ripples and bubbles and lint in the edges. That's the other thing I didn't mention before. There's the ripples and the bubbles that make this difficult, but also the very edges of the pickguard. It is so easy to ruin the pickguard if you get even the tiniest amount of dust along that outside edge, because it'll never go away. You'll stick it down and you'll always see it around the edges. In fact, if I get dust underneath the backing on these, if I happen to accidentally get a little bit of lint or dust from sanding, or just dust that's floating in the shop, if I get a little bit of that on the pickguard, I throw out that pickguard and I just cut out a whole new one. It's not salvageable at that point. You can never get that crap off of the edge. Okay, very important. All right, so what I got in here is a surgeon's scalpel with a whole bunch of blades, and every single pickguard gets a brand spanking new, fresh surgeon scalpel blade. Okay, I'm not messing around here. I'm not just using a regular number 11 razor blade. I'm using these disposable scalpel blades and one for each pick guard because, again, it's just that important. And then these, once you get it on there, these come from the printmaking world, which I don't know anything about, but I guess if just off the top of my head, if you look these up online on Amazon or something, they would probably be called printmaking rollers. Okay, but these are critical. These are great. Very cheap. They come in a pack of 3 like this, different sizes. And actually, all the sizes are pretty useful. The big one's probably the least useful. Often I don't use that, but I have used it for different things. But these 2 smaller ones, it is actually very nice to have these 2 different sizes. This is for obviously rolling out the bubbles and the ripples after you get it on there. Even with your best effort, you will always have some bubbles. But with these, you can actually roll them towards the edge and eventually they will roll out. And then the last critical thing here, and I picked this up from Irvin Samaji's book, The Responsive Guitar. And this is just a dowel that I've beveled. And I did 2 different bevels just so I'd have options when I'm using this. There's a more shallow bevel and a steeper bevel on this side. And this is simply for, here, let me move this to the side. Slide this guitar forward so you can see a little bit of the, can't really even see the pick guard. But essentially, this is for taking that bevel and placing it down like this and just, I hold it with 2 hands like this so I'm nice and steady because you are working right over the guitar. And it's just for working the very edges which don't want to seat with just your fingertips. So having a good hard block with a bevel cut into it really helps. And I already did this earlier, but now I'm just checking some of the areas that look like maybe they could seat more, but honestly, I think that's as seated as it's going to be. So anyway, even with all of that fussing, all of these, this preparation, these extra tools, all that care, it still manages to not be perfect. Such is life. Man, you guys tell me in the chat, just curious, if you guys enjoy the last couple stages of a guitar build. So that would be like everything through prepping for finish, finishing, and then all the little micro things that come after finish, which in my case are, right now I'm nut slotting and I'm going to intonate the saddle, putting the pick guard on. I am putting pickups in this actually, so that will be cool. I'm going to be putting pickups in, which I do kind of enjoy that. Strangely enough, I enjoy that process. But anyway, do you guys enjoy the end of the guitar build? Do you like it more than the middle or the beginning stage, or do you dread it as I do? I'd be interested to hear. All right, I'm gonna keep on doing what I was doing now before we started streaming, and I will explain what I'm doing as we're going here. So I was in the middle of putting these tuners on before the stream started. So that's where we're leaving off. These are Steinberger gearless tuners. They are a different conception of a tuner entirely. So rather than passing the string through a hole in the post, tying it, and then rotating the post and having the string wrap around that post in order to tighten it and give it tension, this is a completely different type of tuner where it still has the hole in the post. You pass the string through the hole, you tighten down the string lock, that's this part on the top. And then you, in order to tune it, the tuning knob is actually in the back of the headstock. You turn this and the post will actually dive straight down into the body of the tuner. So I'll bring that up here so you can kind of see that. So the post actually dives down into, that cavity there and brings the string with it, and that's what gives it tension. And the only downside to that, there's pros and cons to everything, is that with a standard tuner, when you wrap it around the post, you can continue to wrap it around the post indefinitely. Obviously, the string will break eventually, but you never run out of range. It can keep rotating. That tuner can rotate forever. Whereas with this, there's actually a range to how far it goes before it bottoms out inside the tuner cavity. And so it's something you just get used to, though. It's very easy. You just have to, when you install strings, you make sure that the post is all the way up. Then you lock the string in, and that'll give you enough range to get to tension before you bottom out in the tuner cavity. All right, so I like to take these things apart completely as I'm installing them. And that's just so I can tap this into place with a little hammer. You'll notice there's these little drilled holes at the edges of the tuner holes, and those are for a little pin that is on the bottom side of the tuner. Well, if you can see that little pin, right? And that is simply for orienting the tuner straight so that the string goes straight into the hole. Okay, place that in there, give it a little tap, tap, taparoo. Look at this freaking thing. This is a broken fretting hammer from like 15, 20 years. This is like 20 years old, I think. But the brass part of this totally shattered. But I still use it for the plastic part for little things like this, So I don't have to use my fretting hammers for this. All right, get these on there. Tighten down the nut. These are a little bit of extra work. Putting on a regular pair of Goto tuners is a lot easier. I guess I didn't talk about the benefit, though, of these tuners. So they have the equivalent of a 40-to-1 gear ratio, apparently. Now, I say the equivalent because technically they don't have a gear ratio because they are gearless. They do not have gears. They're not rotating. Again, they're diving straight down. But just to give you some scale for that, a typical geared tuner would be like 14 or 16-to-1. A good geared tuner would be 18-to-1, or even the best I've seen is 21-to-1. Now, again, these are an equivalent of 40-to-1. So really a whole different ballpark of tuning precision. And that's why I like them. I don't put them on everything, though. I mix it up. So sometimes I'll do standard tuners. On these parlors, for whatever reason, I really like using these. So this will be my first Florentine cutaway parlor. And I think that's cool because I feel like, this guitar is going to be all about ease of playability. It has a very short scale length. It has the cutaway. It doesn't weigh a lot. And it has these super precise tuners. And so I think parlor guitars, I don't know any that have cutaways. And that's because the instrument is so small itself, and generally you're strumming on an instrument like this. I think that's what most people are doing. And so most of the time you won't see a cutaway on a very, very small guitar. But I thought it would really add something in this case. But we'll see. And let's hop over to the chat. Eric, do you have a finish on that fretboard? Yes, although how much of it is still left on that fretboard, I'm not sure, because I had to do some extra work on the frets. I'll just say it, I stupidly polished the frets. So much time goes I work on one thing on this guitar, and then so much time passes before I get to the next step that I forget what I did. And I'm not a great note taker. I'd probably do better work if I was, but I'm not the type of person that will write a little note, okay, was at this stage, and then leave it, on the guitar so I know where to pick up. I just hope that I'll remember, and I didn't. So anyway, I had left this guitar off, um, still needing a little bit of a fret level. I hadn't leveled the frets yet, but again, so much time passed that when I got back to it, I just I thought I had already done the fret level, and actually the reason why I thought that was because I had a slew of repairs come in, and some of those were involved fret leveling. And so anyway, I polished the frets, and then as I was getting ready for the next thing, I realized I pulled out the fret rocker and was like, oh, that's right, these are not level. So I had to re-level them, I had to level them, crown them, and then repolish the whole thing. And through those processes involved 4/0 steel wool, involved using that a couple of times. And I actually am not sure if there's any finish left on that board. I'm probably gonna add a little bit of oil again at the end here. But I'm gonna look at it. I'm not sure because it might still have the finish on it. Sometimes it's hard to tell, especially if you're using true oil or something like that. So yeah, but yes, the idea is that should have finish on it is the point. And I use true oil for that fretboard. Oh, and the reason why that should have finish on it is because it's maple. Okay, if you have a rosewood or an ebony fretboard or some other oily wood, okay, a lot of these dense tropical woods are very oily, and their surface doesn't even need a finish. So you can actually leave it as a raw surface. On almost any guitar you see out there, the surface of the fretboard is actually a raw surface. It's only when you have, well, I guess in the guitar industry world, it's only when you have a maple fretboard. But of course, in the boutique world where we're using all sorts of woods, it's just any wood that doesn't naturally have the oils to protect and seal itself. Okay. When I do Wangi fretboards, I actually just don't know how oily Wangi is. I, it's an uncommon wood, so I just don't quite know. And so I always put a little bit of finish on those as well, just to seal it. Okay, let's go back to the bench. Yeah, let's do this for you so I can talk to you guys. Okay, we got one more of these tuners to get on here. You know what? Nobody answered my question. What was my question? It was, what do you guys, what was my question? My question was, do you guys enjoy the final stages of a guitar build, meaning finishing and all of the other little micro stuff? Because I'll just give it away right now, my end of things, which is that, well, actually, I do enjoy it. There's an aspect of enjoyment to it, which is actually what develops the impatience. But I find that I become too impatient at the end. And so it's hard to enjoy it because I'm kind of rushing through it. And this is after, what am I at? 16 years of building full time. And I still just can't help but rush through the end process. I get a little bit better at it. I, control myself sometimes, but it's just hard. Like you you tend to think, even if you've done something many, many times, and you should have a more realistic understanding of the timeline, you tend to overestimate the timeline. Or I guess I should speak only for myself. I tend to overestimate the timeline and think, oh, wow, I just got through finishing. All right, I should be done by the end of tomorrow. And it's never the case. There's always more little micro things that I'm not thinking of, or little things come up that, delay me. And anyway, that leads me into being a little more impatient than I should be, which leads to mistakes. And all my guitars, all of them, end up with, I've learned to accept this, some kind of little ding or something like that that I just don't fix. Because as you get closer to the end, the guitar becomes just more and more precious, and it's easier to, as everything gets refined, the finish and everything else, it's easier to get just these a little mark or scratch or something here or there. And I just find it's inevitable. There's going to be something. If it's really bad, I have to fix it. If it's small enough, at some point, you just got to ship it. It's done. Not even I'm using shipping in the vague sense that, I don't know, business people talk about doing tasks, not physically shipping. But that too, I ship my guitars across the country. But at some point, you got to ship it. You got to just, it's shipped, it's done. I'm done the project. That's what we're trying to do here. Trying to ship it. Forgot to tap this one in. Slide that back. Give that a little tap. My broken hammer. Tighten up the nut. Where did my Allen key go? So these tuners, I gotta find that Allen key. These tuners have these little tiny set screws. In fact, they're so tiny that when I tighten them with the Allen key actually distorts and twists because this is so skinny and small that it doesn't have like the beam strength to not deform as you're using it. That's how tiny these set screws are. I love these tuners, but I will say having little tiny set screws on them doesn't, I don't love that. I mean, it's a great design, and that's just, I think, the only good solution to this design. But I'm always just very nervous with really small set screws like this. They're so easy to lose or to strip. So when I tighten these, I tighten I tighten one a little bit, then go back to the other, tighten that just a hair, then go back to the other. Okay, so I don't just drive one all the way home and then go to the other. I kind of ease them both into place so they kind of meet in the middle. And we'll get the string lock. Again, that's what this part is. Everyone thinks this is the tuner. That's actually the lock that goes on the top. And we are ready. Man, look at those tuners. They look so cool, especially with the bird's eye maple. The gold on bird's eye maple just really works. All right, we're going to put some strings on this thing. How about that, guys? There's a big spider web I just pulled out of there. I've talked about that in other videos, how at one point, at least, maybe still, there were all these spider webs in here. Again, because this sat on the shelf for so long. So strings, I had a pack right here. So we're going to use these D'Addario strings. I'm overemphasizing D'Addario because I continue to get comments on how I pronounce D'Addario, which is not correct, and that's fine. I accept that that's not correct. But my God, people, can you just let me not be correct? It's not a big deal. I get it. I understand it's actually pronounced D'Addario. I will try and do better. All right, so D'Addario strings have a nice color coding system on the ball ends of the strings. Now, whenever I install strings, I always give it this little bend about an inch above the ball, or basically just past the end of the excess windings. And what that's going to do is, here, let me see if we got this on camera here. All right, what that's going to do, it puts this little kink or bend in the string right where it's naturally going to bend, right where it exits the pinhole and turns towards the saddle. So it's naturally going to create this bend over time. So you might as well just give it that sharp bend right now, and that's going to dramatically help with your string stretch. Rather than if you just stick the strings in there, over time it's going to create that bend and settle in, and that means you're going to be tuning and retuning and tuning and retuning, and it's going to be super annoying. Okay, so let's check out these tuners right here. I'll show you how these work. So like I mentioned before, I'm going to bring the tuner post all the way up to the top of its range. And then we can pass the full uncut string through the hole. There we go. And then I will take the string and I'll just brace myself off the top of the headstock here. It's the easiest way to do that. And I'm actually going to pull it tight. Again, it just helps with the limited range you have. Don't start with your string loosely in there. Pull it tight. And then one thing I will say, which Ned Steinberger himself is he's the guy who designed these tuners. Ned Steinberger told me, which is that you can crank the hell out of these locks. Like, don't be afraid to do that. You're not, apparently, I guess, according to him, you're not going to break those locks. So you can crank on them nice and tight. And in my experience, I've never broke them. So when I lock it nice and tight. And then to tune it, again, we just turn down here and that's it. That's it. In a nutshell, that's how easy it is to tie strings on these. Now, I will say on definitely the D and the G, sometimes I'll do it on the A and the B anyway, because mine as well. But I'll actually wrap it around the post once and then around this portion of the string that sticks out and then tighten it down. The reason I don't do it on this string is it's just too thick. I can't do it. And this string happens to hold just fine. But the D and the G string are very high tension. The G string is the highest tension string on a steel string guitar. Interestingly enough, just as a fun fact, the G string on a classical guitar is actually the lowest tension string. So yeah, classical guitars are just totally different in every way. But anyway, the G string, if I don't give it that extra wrap, I find with these tuners, the string doesn't hold. So I'll wrap it around the post and then around the exiting end of the string nub, and then tighten it down. And that holds together beautifully. All right, let me cut this. Check out my caddy that I made. I just wanted to design something for holding all of the all of the the string change and playing tools here. So I've got, I've got clippers, I've got a string winder, I've got a capo, I've got a pin remover, and a little cavity that holds picks. It's fun. That was a fun little project that wasted more time than it honestly should have, but I don't know. I like this thing. And since we are doing the nut slotting next, we only need the outside E strings. What we're going to do is we're going to use the outside E strings to set our overall string spacing, meaning the total width of our string spacing. And then we can use the StewMac string spacing ruler to mark out the spacing for the other 4 strings in between. All right, let's check out the chat real quick. Nothing new. Back to here. All right, and we got 12 people watching. That's not bad. We need more. Go tell your friends. No, don't do that. Your friends will be pissed. They're not into this stuff. They don't like guitar making. But maybe they would if you bugged them about it enough. All right, so here's the E string. You know what you do? Here's the move. You steal one of your family members, like your grandmother's cell phone, and you subscribe her to this podcast and mark the bell notification too, so she gets all the notifications. And then see her in a month and see if she's into guitar making then. She might be. She'll have no idea why. She won't know that you secretly subscribed her to this podcast, but it'd be a fun little experiment for grandma. All right, so once again, same thing with the treble E string. I'm going to put that little bend about an inch up just ahead of the windings here and pin it. So these pins are actually buffalo horn, which is kind of cool, as in water buffalo. I know some of you guys right now are Googling, getting on your Google sticks to see if that's illegal. And I'll answer it for you. Yes, it is. These are poached. I actually traveled to Africa myself and killed those water buffalo. So we're going to pull this tight and tighten that down. And here I'll show you what I was talking about. It's not super necessary with the E string because it's not as high tension as the G and the D. But with the extra piece here, I can take this, wrap it around, go under the string, and then back over top like this. Okay. And that just gives a little bit of an actual friction lock to it, which just helps with the slippage, again, on the very high tension strings, like the D and the G. What'll happen with the G, if I don't do that in 100% of the time, because it's such a high tension string, is I will tune it up to about F sharp right before G, and then it'll just stay there no matter, I'll keep tuning it. And what's happening is it's so much tension that it can't hold. And so once it gets up to F sharp, it just keeps, as you tune higher, it just keeps slipping back down to F sharp. Can't really make it all the way up to G. By the way, I did not poach these buffalo. Jokes, people, jokes. Okay, max string spacing ruler. Well, actually, first, before we use this, let's set our overall string spacing. So a couple tools here. This, I always call this a rhombic file. I've seen it called a feather file, but essentially it's this tapered file. Some people sell this. I've seen this at guitar shows, the kind of guitar shows like the Woodstock show, where you'd have some lutherie suppliers show up too. And they were selling these specifically as nut slotting starter notch files. I don't know if they called them exactly that, but essentially they were selling them just for this exact task. And you know what? They work so good with this that I actually really appreciate them for this job. You can even use these to cut all your nut slots if you are good at rolling the file to get a close approximation of the diameter of your strings. It's not terribly hard to do, but hey, if you have the the gauged files that most of us do have, either from StuMac or I have these Japanese files from Uo Chikyu, however you pronounce that. I'm not Japanese, so I can't pronounce that. And I like those files actually more than the StuMac files, and they're like a third of the price. So I'll show you those in a little bit. But for now, we're going to cut starter notches. So I'm going to take my pencil, and I like to just eyeball in how I want these strings to sit. And what I'm looking at, quite simply here, let me pull you guys in a little closer here. What I'm looking at is the distance from the top of the bevel, or you could say where the bevel begins, the distance from there to the string. A standard that a lot of people go for is 3/32. But again, I just eyeball that in. I'm not sure if I end up at that 3/32 or a little bit larger. But here's the deal. If you're too close to these, we've all had this, right? Where you play a guitar and it kind of pops off the bevel and makes that awful out of tune squealing sound. Nobody wants that. So you definitely want to be safely away from the edge of the bevels. And for anything like me starting out, for years, I remember I always underestimated how far you need to be from the bevels, and I would always end up having to redo it because I would get that problem. I would have them slipping off. So it's often further away from the bevels than you think for it to be comfortable. Something like right here. It's a little hard for me to do this right now because the camera's right in my face, but I think that is it. My pencil tip broke. Come on. So then I just mark it, looking at it again, make sure that looks good. Yep, I'd say so. And then move the other one. Sometimes it helps to see them both at the same time. Now the bass string is a bit more forgiving. You can actually have it closer to the bevels without a problem. When you have that problem where the string is slipping off the bevel and squealing, that tends to always be a treble E string problem. Still doesn't mean you should put this right at the edge of the bevel, because you can certainly create that problem and build, the first guitar to actually have that problem. But I'm just saying you got a lot more leeway on the bass string than on the treble string. All right, so now we can pull this to the side, and we're just going to cut a little starter notch. So I'm going to take this rhombic file, feather file, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to place it right in between those two marks. Make sure it's nice and centered. And then I'm just going to gently pull and just make a little cut, just like that. I'm not trying to cut down to depth or anything. This is a starter notch, just so it can hold the string like that. That's it. Let's do the same thing for the base E, except here, because the diameter of the string is so much larger, I'm going to roll the file to accommodate that larger diameter. So first I'll just make a little cut, and then I can roll the file to add more, I almost said girth to the cut, which is a fine word to use. It's the correct word, but I know how you guys get, so I'm not going to do it. There we go. All right, how's it going over here? All right, good, good. No questions so far. We're going to keep on going. So now we are ready for the StewMax string spacing ruler. Let me sip my drink. So the way this ruler works, it's really not a proper ruler. It actually has no units of measurement on it. All it has is a bunch of marks that get progressively closer together from one end to the other. Very simple idea. And the reason for this is such. Let me explain. The reason is, you might think, okay, we have our two strings. Well, why not just measure out 5 equal spaces for the other strings and just put those strings right on those marks? You'd be correct. You would get yourself, equally spaced centers of the strings all the way across. However, you would notice when you play it that the strings would feel more crowded on the bass end than on the treble side. And that's simply because these bass strings are wider. They take up more space. So what we actually want is not equal centers between all of the strings, but we want equal spaces between the edges of the strings. Okay? So having a bunch of marks that are progressively, in a very, subtle way, progressively tighter together, all you have to do is move this around until you find the marks that line up with our outside strings, and that will give you the extra necessary space on the bass strings, because they'll be a little bit wider on this side than over here. Make sense? Yeah, I think it makes sense. A lot of this live streaming stuff, obviously, just involves talking to yourself. It's a very strange thing, talking to yourself. I think normally in the past, before live streaming, if you were talking to yourself and other people were watching or noticing, that would be embarrassing. But somehow this is not embarrassing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There we go. A little tighter. So you can see I'm trying to find which of these marks line up. And I know I'm blocking the camera with my head a little bit right now. Actually, I'm going to switch camera to move this damn thing out of the way. All right, so we line this up. Not quite there on this one. So we go a little tighter. Now this looks, well, is it this one or this one? This looks perfect. So this is it. And then you just got to hold it. So it's the hardest part. Hold it steady. Take a deep breath, which helps steady yourself. And then a small mark. Here's a slogan for you to remember. A small mark is an accurate mark. You might be tempted, especially if you struggle with your vision, to do this sort of thing when you mark your center lines and your nut slots and whatever. But I mean, it should be an obvious thing, but I think it's just easily forgotten. But you lose so much of your accuracy when you fatten up the mark like that. I literally just dot it. And then if I need to see it better after I pulled the ruler away and it's a little easier to focus and steady my hand, I can add to the mark just slightly if I need to see it at that point. But these marks right now, they're just little pricks, and I can see them enough, so I'm not going to mark them any further because I just need to see them enough to be able to make this cut. A small mark is an accurate mark. So here's the B string. Whoop, I skated off right there. Let me try that again. A little more pressure. There we go, so it doesn't skate. This, by the way, is an ebony nut. This is not bone, obviously, it's black. I usually do bone nuts, but for this one, here, I'll switch to the top camera. I know that ebony nuts work, I've done them several times before. Where is my, there we go. I know that these work and they work well, especially when you orient the grain. So it's the end grain, so it's facing up. So this is all end grain on the top. So it's a very hard wear surface. Whereas if you do the side grain, it could still work, but over time you'll be sawing into that side grain. End grain is very tough stuff. So it has good wear properties, which makes it good for the nut. But yeah, I wanted to do an ebony nut here simply for aesthetic reasons because it sort of completes the framing of the ebony binding on the fretboard to the nut and then to this line going around the headstock here. Okay, so I thought that was cool. That's why I did it. And so we're marking out the B string. All right, I think that's plenty to hold the string. There's the G. So the B and the G, I can cut just straight, just like I did the E string. But then it's the A and the D I have to roll, just like I did for the bass E string. But before I roll, let me just accurately get my marks. And then I'm going to step back and just kind of look at it for a second. Okay, what do you guys think? Looks pretty good. If anything, actually the B string looks really close to the E. Let me check that out. What's nice is these aren't deep yet, so behooves you to just, like, it doesn't matter if you mark these off because they're so shallow, and this is all going to get sort of worked down. So it makes sense to just check. All right, is that it or is this it? This is it. How did I get those so far off? Oh, it is just, okay, it's just the B string. I marked the B string way off. Remember what I said about small mark being an accurate mark? It's still true, but I can see I mistook, because it was such a small mark, I mistook it for something else. So I just completely cut on the wrong thing there. But again, it's just a starter notch, so it doesn't matter. I'll just now make the real cut right next to it. But what's good is it was obvious enough. I could just by stepping back and looking at it, which I do frequently with everything, call it the eyeball test. Step back and look at it, you can pick out the mistake. So there we go. We got two B string marks. I know that the one on this side here, I'll even mark it. That's the real B string. All right, let's get those other strings on there. By the way, if you guys have any questions, not even about what we're doing specifically, but just about guitar making in general, I like to keep this thing fun and open-ended. We can go in any direction that you guys want to go in. If you want to talk about, I don't know, finishing or, build philosophy kind of stuff, design stuff, or something guitar related, we'll go there. Okay. So now we got the A string, give it that little bend, about an inch up. There we go. Kind of off camera there. All right, so once again, bring this all the way up. All right, tying strings is kind of boring though. Give me something to talk about, guys. Give me a good guitar maker question. Pass the full uncut string through, okay? And then, like I said before, you want to tighten this. Like you want good tension on the string when you tighten this down, and that just gives you full range of tuning adjustment. And then, like I said before, just for a little extra security so these don't slip as I'm tuning, wrap that around the post and then around that main portion of the string. This is not a normal method of tying these, but I have found I don't think these were really designed for acoustic guitar strings. And just doing this little wrap and bend here makes them work with the acoustic strings. It's just that, these strings are a little higher tension. They're also a little thicker, larger diameter than electric guitar strings. And so the cavity in there is only a certain size. And so some of the wider strings get kind of bunched up in there. Where did my clips go? Oh, right there, right in front of me. All right, let's see if you guys, Eric, you are not talking to yourself. You are talking to me. Okay, good. Well, that's good to know. And oh, and apparently 19 other people. That's pretty good. 19 is a good number. We could always do more. More people want to join in. Again, steal your grandmother's phone and subscribe her to DIY guitar making. Don't tell her, just do it. All right, where did the rest of my strings go? Right here. You know, I try to make this podcast show, whatever you want to call it, live stream, so that you guys aren't just watching me run around my shop and look for misplaced tools all the time. Because honestly, if you were just a fly on the wall in here, that is what you would be watching. 90% of the time is me just looking for tools. But you know, before these start, I do make an effort to actually kind of have some things ready, so we're not doing that. But as you can see, you know, this line of work is not really made. I'm on the wrong camera. That's the one I wanted. Things like guitar making and woodworking don't really jibe with live streaming very well. That's why there's not a lot of people doing it. I was looking it up on Twitch. Twitch. I don't know why I always want to say it like that. Twitch. I was looking up on Twitch, and there was almost no one doing. Obviously, wasn't really anyone doing guitar making, but almost no one even doing woodworking on Twitch. And again, Twitch is specifically a live streaming only platform, whereas YouTube, you have live streams, but it's more of a you know, edited, produced video platform. And of course, there's a lot of woodworking content and guitar making content on YouTube, which is great. All right, so we'll pull that tight, lock that sucker down, nice and tight. That's what Ned Steinberger told me. He said, because I called him specifically about using these for acoustic guitars, because I know that they were made for electrics, these Steinberger tuners. And he said, I don't know, maybe he just wanted me to keep using these so that he could, you know, sell more of them or something. But he did say they should work fine for acoustics, and just not to be afraid to tighten the hell out of these if they're slipping. You're not going to damage these locks by really cranking on them. Okay, G string right here. And so we got Taylor writes, thanks for streaming. Yeah, thanks for joining, buddy. Welcome. And so like I said, I have this show coming up, guitar show. It's not like one of these high-end, like a Woodstock show or a artisan guitar show or something like that. It's more like a one of these retail shows, trade shows. One of those shows where they encourage people to bring used guitars to attempt to trade with vendors and stuff. So a much, what's the word? I don't want to say a mean word. Lower brow crowd, right? And don't get me wrong, that's me. Like, I'm a very lowbrow kind of guy, but it's not a high-end boutique guitar show, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. It's not people looking to spend $8,000 on a guitar. It's in a lot of cases, it's people buying a first guitar. So that's why a lot of the vendors there are not even necessarily guitar makers, but local music shops and things like that. So, you know, you might see some vintage Martins there. You usually see a lot of vintage guitars, and even some just cheap, you know, Takaminis and things like that. Pull that tight. But anyway, it's called the Lehigh Valley Guitar Show. I actually didn't even know it was happening until 2 days ago. And because it's right down the road for me, I definitely wanted to sign up. And so it's very perfect timing too, because I'm going to have this guitar done, which I'm really excited about this guitar, genuinely. And I'm going to bring 4 or 5 other guitars to the show. And so, hey, if you guys are in the area or if you want to come out, it starts at 11 o'clock. It's one day only, which, man, I got to say, I love these one day only shows. Seems like most shows, whether they're guitar shows or these art or craft type shows, are usually a full weekend. And that turns the whole event into just a big logistical thing where you're, of course, getting a hotel and, having to worry about food and where you're staying and just, and the security of all your stuff throughout the process as you transport it from place to place. But when you have these one-day shows, you don't have any of that. And it's just fantastic. And I've heard people say at these shows that, and the people working at the show, the people who work for the show, I've heard them say that the one-day shows, they find what you tend to have, the psychology of it is that people come in and they know that it's one day, so they do all their buying on that first day. Whereas if you have a 2-day show or even a 3-day show, the first or the second day, people are just looking, right? And they're thinking, and they're being smart. This is exactly what I would do if I happened to be in the area and knew there was a show. And it's like I would go there, I would check it out. I would not be prepared to buy. I would just be looking, and you're always on guard in any sales type as a consumer in any situation where there's salesmen afoot. Um, and that we don't like to think of ourselves as salesmen, but technically in that environment, you naturally are. So anyway, everyone's on guard, and no one has their wallets out on the first day or the second day. So anyway, if you have a one-day show, it's just a compressed time frame where people show up knowing that, like, okay, it's if I'm interested, I'm interested, and so it's now or never. I'm either going to go for it or I'm not. It's cool. So that's one thing I'm going to look for now. If I'm considering going to a show, not that I won't go to a 2-day show, they can be very fun, but I think there's a real advantage to these shorter single-day shows. All right, almost there, guys. You know what I need to do? I have a monitor in front of me, but it's just a monitor for the cameras. It doesn't show me the stream, so I actually can't see your comments unless I walk over to the computer, which is right over there. That's why I think it would make for a less interrupted flow to these videos if I could see your comments pop up right in front of me and we could chat that way. So I'm going to work on that, guys. But for now, it just means every once in a while, I got to take 2 steps over there to check out the computer. Tighten that down, nice and tight. Give it that little extra wrap. Pull that nice and tight. Clip it off. There you go. All right, this is getting exciting, guys. So this saddle right now, by the way, is not crowned. It's dead flat because I'm going to carve in a fully compensated saddle positions onto the top. I didn't do that yet though, because I like to get the strings onto here so I can see where they naturally splay along the top of the bridge. Yeah, let's go with this view right here. I think this is better. You guys can see me on the small screen, but you got the guitar over here on the big screen. You got too many tools lying about. That's when it gets a little dangerous. When you have too many tools cluttered around your guitar. We don't need this anymore. The rhombic file's going away. All right, so let me show you the files that I like to use. It's these guys. So like I was saying, or attempting to say, chick you, I like these files. They're simple, they're cheap. The only downside is because they're not tapered, they don't have that thickness in the middle. The very small files like the E and the B can fairly easily snap while you're cutting with them. They can just break right in half. I can show you some of the student files that are that are all broken in half. Students are breaking them all the time just because they're not used to it, obviously. When you presented with a new tool, I know to be really careful with these, but they don't necessarily. So they get started and it just snaps because these are like wafer thin. I mean, the gauge is 13 thousandths of an inch for this one. 13 thousandths of an inch. Think of a 13 thousandth of an inch feeler gauge and how easy it would be to just snap that. But with this price, it doesn't really bother me. I can always just buy new ones. They're very cheap, very, very cheap. And there's something about, this is a preference thing, so I'm not ragging on the StuMac files. They're fine. I have them. But I like the feel. I don't love the feel of the tapered files. I like these thin files. I just like how they feel when they cut. Sorry, guys, I keep clearing my throat here. I feel like we're always a little bit sick nowadays. We got 2 young kids, so sicknesses are common, as anyone with kids knows. All right, so we're going to start. Yeah, let's take this out. Just making sure we didn't have anything else to do. So now this can come out. We're going to put it in the nut slotting vise, and we're going to make our initial cuts on the nut slotting vise. Excuse me. See, that's ebony. Nice piece of, is that Macassar? I think it's Macassar ebony, not good. But Macassar has like these caramel streaks in it. Okay, so we're going to be using this, and I want to fix this down to the table. There's lots of ways to do this, but what I'm going to do is pull out this other vise. So we're going to have a vise inside of a vise. Get that away from the guitar, just like that. And I'm thinking I'm going to move the guitar. How about that? Let's get it out of the way. Unfortunately, all the other benches are very messy right now. All right, I think that's a safe spot. So essentially what we're going to do, you don't need this vise to do this. You can do all your nut slotting right over the guitar. That's how I used to do it. And in fact, we're only going to use this to get close, and then there'll be a little bit of micro finessing of the last couple strokes with this installed over top of the guitar. And I'll show you why. When we get to that, you'll see why that's advantageous, why we can get a little more precision that way. But let's first load this up into here. These little jeweler's vices, which the StewMac nut slotting vise, that's what that is, by the way. It's a jeweler's vise. StewMac is basically in the business of renaming tools that already exist. So yeah, if you could find a jeweler's vise, you can find pretty much the same thing. So we'll clamp this down just like that. Adjust the camera. Alrighty. Get this in a little closer too. How about that, guys? There we go. And we got a couple comments here. That's good. That's fun. Yeah, I agree with the thing about the moderator. Well, we'll get to that. Let's see what these other questions are here. Okay. Tom Casty writes, there's a luthier who streams on Twitch. B Bumstead. B Bumstead. Okay. Bebumbstead. B Bumstead. I enjoy watching his streams sometimes. All right. I will check that out. As part of my research, business research that I'm perpetually in for myself. This week I'm going to be watching a lot of in the background, just putting it on while I work, a lot of Twitch streams. Just because I'm joining the platform, and I'm 39 years old. I'm almost 40, and so I'm not really the natural demographic for that platform. So I have to kind of immerse myself in it a little bit, see what these kids are up to. The kids are up to these days. If the weather is nice, I might ride the motorcycle up to the show. There we go, Tom Casty. That would be super cool. We'd love to have you there, man. That would be cool to see you at the show. And I'll shop your tonewood shop to see if you can hand deliver some tonewood to me. Absolutely. I've got a lot of stuff right now. Western red cedar, the Spessart oak, of course, and Tasmanian blackwood looks especially stunning. I'm going to be using some of that Tasmanian blackwood myself on the next one, and Wangi and all the other usual stuff, Port Orford cedar. Anyway, that's cool. Yeah, we can definitely do that if you come out. So yeah, just give me a call, or you know how to reach me, email, whatever, and we'll make it happen, man. We'll meet up. Okay. Oh, here's the other questions. Okay. Stick around, but I'm glad I found the channel. We'll be back. Good luck on the guitar. Awesome. Great. Well, thanks for coming out, man. I think those Japanese files work better on bone than they do on synthetics. Tusk, that's good to know. Yeah, I wouldn't know. I don't know that I've ever used them on Tusk. I'm trying to think of even maybe a repair. I did use them recently on the plastic nut. But that's good to know. Thank you, Tom. AI viewers stream boo. Okay, I don't know if that's just spam or what that is. Eric, you're going to need a moderator. I volunteer. All right, which this is Tom Casty on Twitch here, Uncle Tom in Boston. That would be, honestly, if you want to do that, I'm not sure technologically how that works exactly with someone who's not physically here. But, I've seen I've seen a lot of live shows that work really well where there's someone else in the shop basically doing the role that I'm doing right now, where they're sitting at the computer. Often for woodworkers, where it's like a husband and wife duo, I find is very common. And you know, one person is just reading the comments while the other person's continuing to tinker and work on whatever they're working on, so they don't have to stop and walk over here like I'm doing. Okay. Tom says, hey, I'm 68 years old and watch the Twitchers all the time. Is that what they call them? Okay, that's good to know. The Twitchers. So what is twitching then? I'm sure that is a verbiage in that world. It is a normal thing for the moderator to not be where the streamer is. Okay. Well, we'll talk about that. I would absolutely welcome that. All right, let's go slot that nut. So you always want to use the file that is either the same gauge as the string or larger, never smaller, okay? Even if it's very close. So if you have a 54 thousandths of an inch string, which is what we have for the E string here, you wouldn't want to use a 53 thousandths of an inch file. Here we have a 56. If we had a 53 file and the 56, we would choose the 56 for sure. Even if the only file we had was a 60, which is quite a bit larger than 54, I would go with the 60. You'd never go under, because if it's under, if it's even slightly less than the diameter of the string will never seat at the bottom. It'll get wedged up higher in the channel. So you lose all your accuracy of depth when you're cutting. All right, so we're going to take this, and you know what's silly? With all my yammering, I forgot to mark the height that we're cutting down to. So that's a problem. So I got to bring the guitar back over here. Don't know what we're cutting to till we mark this. All right, so we'll put that right there. That was one of my pins popping out. That's one thing with these Steinberger tuners, because you start with the strings at some tension, like before you even tune it up, just locking them in, they get locked in kind of tight. It's a little bit more fiddly getting the nut out of here and back into here. But there we go. Not too bad. Load that up. Make sure it's seated all the way before we mark. I always kind of look at the edges, because you'd be surprised how often you put it in there, you think it's all the way down, but it's actually kind of wedged in there and it's sticking up slightly. And then, you know, you cut everything and you actually end up going too low, because then when you put it back in, and it actually does under tension click all the way down to the bottom. Now everything you've cut is now too low. I did that recently actually, and had to, you know, backfill the nut slots and recut them, which you can do, by the way, with baking soda and super glue. You just rub some baking soda into the nut slots, add a drop of water thin super glue, and you can accelerate it if you want, or just wait. And then essentially that mixture of glue and baking soda will form a nice solid mass, similar in density to the bone itself and similar in look. So it won't be, you know, super obvious what you did. It's pretty cool. All right, so we have to determine the height of the fret tops, which I have this group of feeler gauges right here, which I use in the classes for the students. The height of their fret tops doesn't really change, so I can just use this, but it's not going to work for these because this is a different fret wire. So we're going to have to figure this out on the fly here on the camera. So the way you do this, now you might think you could use a caliper, that special StuMac caliper, to do this, but we're not just looking for the number. I actually want to make a feeler gauge set that matches the height of the fret tops, because this is going to become a tool, basically like a fence that we're going to use to make our cuts in the end. And the way this works, if you take a straight edge, which the fret rocker is nothing more than a variety of different sized straight edges all in one piece. We want to find a straight edge that spans the first two frets. So we'll just use this part of the fret rocker. and only the first 2 frets. You don't want to use something that spans several frets because then you're starting to read the bow of the neck rather than just the height of the fret wire itself. So I'm going to figure out this is too thick, so we got to lose one of these. And it's quite a bit too thick, so let me pull a whole feeler gauge out. I'm just going to pull all of these out for now. We're going to put the 7 aside, and you'll see why in just a little bit. The 7 is going to be very useful to us. 7/1000 of an inch feeler gauge. And then I'm going to take a group of these, place it in there. Still way too much. And so what we end up doing is trading these out. First, let me see what happens if I remove that one. I want to get in the ballpark first, get close. All right, we're still rocking, but we're much closer. Swap out this 10 for a 6. Okay, tiniest bit of rock means we're very close. And I'm going to grab some more feeler gauges, which I have over here. Here we go. There's a whole set. So now I have a 6, a 19, and a 12. I just need to swap that out for, I probably want to lose like 0.02 of an inch. So I could trade that 6 out for a 4. I could trade the 19 out for a 17, or I could trade the 12 out for a 10. Oh, I had a 10 over here a minute ago. Let's try that. All right, and like I was saying before, when you have a consistent fret wire that you're always using, and if you're doing minimal leveling or no leveling, you don't necessarily need to do this step every single time and determine this. You can have this set up, but I'm doing something a little different here. So we got to go back to the drawing board. That seems perfect. Excuse me. Just to test it, I'm going to see what happens if I just go up 1. Here, I'll trade the 6 for that 7. So I want to be totally perfect. So I'm going up 1 until it rocks. And then I can go back 1 because then I'll know. Is that rocking? No. I think I saw an 8 in here. Yeah, there it is. Now it's rocking. Okay. So that means we had it right before, but I want to add that 7 at the end. So hold on, I gotta trade this out. 5, there's a 6. Actually, a 6 works pretty good. 7. Okay, so this should work. So this is the height of my fret tops right there. Then I'm going to add 6 or 7/1000 of an inch, depending on, honestly, depending on how confident you are in your abilities in cutting this. The method I'm going to show you, you can get a really accurate result, but as always, everything relies at least a little bit on your own steadiness of hand, your own experience, and eyesight too. That can be a real problem with cutting to lines and things like that. It's one of the biggest struggles I see with a lot of people, a lot of students who take this course, is simply that they don't have very young eyes anymore. Like when they get young students, they do excellent at marking lines and cutting to lines, and the older guys will have obviously more life experience, so they'll be better at other things. But when it comes to like just simply marking lines and stopping before you go past them, that's a young man's game. And I'm not saying that like I'm one of them. I'm starting to see the early signs of some decline in eyesight as well. Although most of mine has to do with long vision. What does that mean? Nearsighted? I always forget. I think that means nearsighted, which is good. I'm sure my eyes are also degrading. I think all eyes degrade in both directions, both your long distance vision and your up close, like your reading vision. But mine is degrading more slowly in the up close, which is great for what I do, truly. Let's strap this together. So I like having these little keychain holders, these little things, because once you have it, you don't want to just have a random pile of feeler gauges. It is way too easy to pick up the wrong thing and end up cutting things wrong. If you just have a pile of feeler gauges, one of the feeler gauges slips out and or it mixes with the other ones that are lying around on the table. In fact, let's just get these out of here so they don't mess with us. Here we go. We have our set. This is what we want. The fret tops plus 6 or 7 thousandths of an inch. And then we're just going to mark this. So this is what I intended to do before we put it into the nut slotting vise. Now, when you go to mark this, don't just rest it there and mark against the nut, because there's a radius to your fretboard and this will flex up flat. So you have to actually press it to the radius. Now, if I really press hard, I can create a whole new larger radius. I don't want to do that. But you can feel it if you just gently press down. You can feel when you're conforming to that radius. That looks good. And there it is. Okay. And like I mentioned before, we're going to take this out and we're going to first cut it close on here, but then the final cut will actually be with the nut installed right here. And we'll be holding this feeler gauge set almost as like a guard here. And when we get to that point, I'm going to show you a really cool trick for how we just talked about declining vision a second ago, but there's a really cool trick with these metal feeler gauges where you can essentially 2x your vision. It's almost like you're looking at the nut slot through a microscope. All right, so this comes back out. And once again, I'm going to need my string clippers to very carefully pull up and get that out. Now let's safely put this to the side. It's a bridge pin. There it is. There's something big bouncing around in the guitar. It's that bridge pin that popped off. It went into the sound hole. There it is. Here we go. Now we're on track. So just to give you guys the order of operations, at least to this point, I always find sometimes it's helpful to backtrack so you understand. What we've done so far is install the outside E strings and mark their location so they're not too close to the bevels. 3/32 of an inch off of the tops of those bevels is kind of standard, but you can do whatever suits you. And then we make the starter notches on those marks with the rhombic file, or you could use a hobby saw, even a razor blade, like almost anything, to just make those little starter cuts that just barely holds those strings into place, so that then we can take the StewMax string spacing ruler and mark out the inside string locations, at which point we can return to the rhombic file and make the starter notches for the inside locations, install the other strings. Then we can create our feeler gauge set, which is the fret tops plus 6 or 7 thousandths of an inch. Now we have our feeler gauge set. We can mark that feeler gauge set onto the front face of the nut so we know what we're cutting to. Load the nut up into here. We're going to cut down to that line, and then we're going to do the final finessing of the nut slots over top of the guitar. Okay. And with that, anything going on in the chat, guys? Let's see. I think I may have searched the wrong thing. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Maybe he means this stream. He was looking for something else. When is it time to be used as firewood? When is the guitar time to be used as firewood? I mean, whenever you've screwed it up enough that you feel like it's irrecoverable, I guess is the answer. Funny thing about that, there was a group in, I think, the 70s, a long time ago, back, these are like the OG luthiers, basically the boutique handmade lutherie world started in the 70s. This whole thing is very young. And there was this group in California, which included Michael Gurian. That's where I heard this from, at a Guild of American Luthiers convention where he was speaking. And they used to meet on the beach of somewhere in California. I don't remember where. And every year, once a year, and they would burn all of their bad, unsellable work. They're experiments and prototypes and stuff like that, which is funny because to the hobbyist builder, it's almost like you hear that if you're not, full time, professionally into this, you hear that and you think, oh my, that's horrible. Like, how could you do it? Why wouldn't you keep that or try to sell it? But I totally get that. I mean, I have so many, I've thought about burning a lot of guitars. I think about it all the time, actually, because I have so many guitars here that are just like early work. I gave one to my brother recently. He is out in California. I gave him one of my bad guitars. Actually, he did pay me for it, but it was like, you know, 200 and some dollars or something. So anyway, your early work, there's like almost nothing you can do with it. And your experimental, like bad work. So it might seem crazy to burn a guitar, but you almost can't even just give it away either, because then it's representative of your work. I gave it away to my brother, but if I had given this, if I just said to you guys on the stream or something like, hey, I don't know what to do with these guitars. Let's say I just wanted to make a little money off of them, and I was like, I'll sell them $100 a piece or something. You're still investing in that guitar. You're still going to feel like you paid for it, and maybe even to you, $100 is like a lot of money and not a little bit of money. So I'm still putting something out there, and you're taking it as a representation of my good work and what I can do. And that's how you're going to present it out in the world too. So other people will see that and think like, oh, okay, this is just some like, amateur, not great guitar builder. So you don't want to, you just don't want to put like your bad work out there. I don't know. That's how I've talked to other luthiers, and that's how it's always been presented to me. And that's also been my experience where it's like, oh, I totally get that now. I can see that. So there's almost nothing you can do with your bad guitars. I don't know. Although I have thought some of these like smaller shows, these less highbrow boutique type shows, the more vintagey shows, like the one I'm going to this weekend, I've often thought maybe I could offload some of my to this crowd. I could offload some of my crappy guitars there. I'm not saying like this crowd, like they're marks, like I'm gonna, cheat them out of their money or something. What I mean more is like they might actually be interested in buying these guitars that I'm not happy with. I'm not impressed with. The the workmanship looks a little sloppy to me just because it's from, over a decade ago, and I didn't have it all together then. So no, long way of saying I don't know what you do with your bad work, but it's inevitable that you'll make it unless you apprentice under some, Irvin Samaji or something like that. In which case, when you do that, I see some of those guys, they do their apprenticeship with Irvin Samaji, and then they come out and their like first guitar is amazing. And that's because it's not really their first guitar. They've been building guitars for someone else this whole time, and and making the mistakes there, and then getting to a very high level and then going out on their own. But for most of us, especially if you're on the stream, I think we're figuring this out on YouTube and, just kind of on our own. And so you're going to make guitars, and it's going to be different for everyone, depending on your natural skill and also your tolerance for, like, you might be more tolerant of sloppiness in the work and be more okay with, putting that out there. Everyone just has a different representation of that. Depending on those things, it might be your first 10 guitars that are firewood, or it might be your first like 30. Honestly, for me, my first guitar that I was happy, actually, I shouldn't say it this way. I was selling guitars before guitar number 49, but guitar number 49 is the earliest guitar, which I still own, and is that the earliest work that I have, which is actually for sale as something that represents me. So that's a long way of saying guitar number 49 for me is where I feel like I hit a level where, okay, I create work now that is sellable. Different for everyone. No real answer there. Okay, great question though. And maybe he was saying that maybe he was making fun of my guitar and saying you should burn that sucker. No way, bro. You're live from username handle. Yeah, bro. I've been researching for hours in the middle of a build, just found your channel today. Oh, that's great, man. Well, welcome. Some of my early works are going to my 2 grandkids. That's great. See, that's awesome. I don't have grandkids yet. I have kids. And they're so young, I would be terrified to give them guitars just yet, but eventually. They're at the age where when they see the guitar, when I have a guitar out, they want to grab the strings and pull them straight out. That's what they want to do with it. So we'll get there. They play a lot of piano though. I am in the middle of my build and my sides have been made by gluing together blocks of wood. Yep, it's about 5 to 8 millimeters thick. Is this too thick? Sorry, I'm just adjusting the camera here for a second, then I'll get to your question. That looks a little better. My face was hiding behind the comments. I'm in the middle of my build and my sides have been made by gluing together blocks of wood. It's about 5 to 8 millimeter thick. Is this too thick for guitar side? Oh, you're talking about the sides. Sides have been made by gluing together blocks of wood. I have to clarify your question here. When you say your sides have been made by gluing together blocks of wood, are you talking about you have your thin sides which you've bent and now you're attaching the 2 sides with the neck block and the end block? That's how I initially read that. But now I'm thinking what you're saying is you've assembled a side slat out of several blocks of wood that are 5 to 8 millimeters thick, which is too thick to bend. So 90 thousandths of an inch. Well, I'll give you a range. 75. I know you were just talking in millimeters. Don't lose me here. We'll get to this. I don't often do things in metric. I'm not against it. Don't go crazy, internet. I use metric and thousandths of an inch and fractions of an inch. I use it all. And a lot of people do that. It's actually fine. You don't have to convert your whole shop to one system. Let's get back on target here. So 5 to 8 millimeters thick. Even without knowing what the conversion is there, that's way too thick for bending, if that's what you're talking about. I feel like that was no, the sides are not bent. Yes, the latter. Okay. So what he's saying is he has material. Sounds like he assembled it from several blocks. Not sure why, but that's fine. But it's just too thick. That's really the spirit of your question. You need to be, I'll ask you another thing too. What is the wood? Because I can give you a more clear answer if I know what the species of wood is. But the range here for bending wood is between 75 thousandths of an inch and 90 thousandths of an inch. If someone in the comments wants to give me the metric conversion for that, that'd be great. But if not, obviously you have access to, the AI powered internet that can do that for you in 2 seconds. So 75 to 90 thousandths of an inch. If it's rosewood or ebony or cherry, these are all woods that bend really easily. You can stick closer to that 90 thousandths of an inch and keep it nice and thick. Okay, and then he writes, but they are already in shape. They were glued together in the shape I wanted, and sanded. So I honestly have no idea what you're talking about. Are you talking about electric guitars? Because there's no way to sand acoustic guitar sides to shape. So I actually don't know what you're talking about. It might be an electric guitar thing. Yeah, and he says it's ash, which ash is a typical electric guitar wood. So anyway, you can, I'm just confused on what the actual question is. You can clarify that for me if you want. But if you're talking about bending sides, which for acoustic guitar making, unless you're doing something completely different, that's just not typically what an acoustic guitar is, you're going to have to bend the sides. I mean, that's just a part of an acoustic guitar. Okay, let's get back to this. All right, so now on the side here, I have, let me add this to the screen. There we go. So I've got my marks. It's in pencil, so I can see it, but you probably can't on this little camera right here. But I've got my depth mark on that side, so I can watch where I'm cutting. And now, tilt that up. Again, I'm going to take a file that is larger than the diameter of my string, or the same size. It's a 54 thousandths of an inch string, so a 54 would work, and anything larger than that. This is a 56, so it works great. And I'm going to place this right in the slot there. Now, ultimately, we're going to cut at a little bit of an angle. You see that? I'm actually over exaggerating the angle a little bit just to show you that we have to cut these nut slots at an angle so that the angle of that ramp peaks right at the front face of the nut, because that is the beginning of our scale length. If you just cut these flat, then the string is going to break, not break as in peak. Well, I'll just use that word. The string is going to peak somewhere randomly along wherever the actual peak is along that flat spot that you cut, because it won't be perfectly flat. So it might peak on the back edge or in the center, excuse me. But we want to guarantee that it peaks on the front edge, okay? But for the first couple seconds of filing, I'm just gonna go flat, and that is just to push the slot out a little bit wider so that I have more of a slot to reference the file in before I then, oops, see, it just popped out. So I'll go a little deeper first. So then I can then turn it and add that little bit of an angle. How much angle? There's no specific amount of angle that you need. Any angle will do, but I like to aim for about the angle of the headstock, which when we're cutting this over top of the guitar, it'll be really easy to follow that headstock angle. I can just imagine it right now. The reason I do that is, one, because it's visually, it's right there. It's easy to follow. But then also it's not too steep. So the one problem you can have with your angle is if you cut it really, really steep, you're basically creating a knife point at the top here, and we don't want to do that. Over time, one, that area is where it peaks is very small, and it'll weaken that area, and possibly your nut slot will get deeper over time. But also you could literally break strings off of that super sharp peak. So a relatively shallow angle. And at the same time, I'm going to clamp this down. We want to watch that we're not tilting. To use aeronautical terms, this would be yaw. We don't want to have any yaw to our cut, sort of angled off side to side. We also don't want to have any roll, which would be like cutting like this. That's the easiest one to screw up, I think, is I see a lot of students will be cutting these and they'll just be angled off like this or like this. And what you might not realize is it's not just about having a slot that's straight up and down and, so the string goes in easy or something like that. But actually, if you're cutting at an angle, by the time it gets to the bottom of the slot, you've actually moved the location of your string over significantly. So now we went through all that trouble to get these perfectly marked spaces between the nut slots. And just by the fact of that you were inadvertently rolling this file and not paying attention to it being square and vertical, just by that fact, you end up losing all of your accuracy of your string locations. Oh, I was going to clamp this down. There we go. I've got these quick grip clamps right here. And one thing to keep near you, where did I put that? Had it just a second ago. You guys are like, what's he talking about? What's he looking for? I'm going to show you in a second. It's actually a can of beer. It's a Fiddlehead IPA. Not that I'm drinking right now on the job here, but it's this right here. See? Fiddlehead IPA. By the way, Fiddlehead, this is like the best IPA you can get. I'm not sure where Shelburne is. I think it's in Virginia. Great beer. That's not the point, guys. Point is, this is a rag stuffed into a can. This rag has been soaked in oil. You only have to do that once ever. You soak it in oil. Doesn't even really matter what type of oil. I mean, don't use vegetable oil. We're not talking about that. But you soak it in. It could be, extra car oil that you have, motor oil. I have this can of Bow Shield down there, which is for like surfaces for your stationary power equipment, like your bandsaw table and your table saw table, to keep them from, getting surface rust. I just soaked this rag in some of that stuff, and it's good forever then. And now all you have to do, very convenient tool, this becomes a tool, the rag in a can. You can keep it by your side whenever you're nut slotting or using hand saws for any kind of work. You know how these two tools, these nut slotting files and handsaws always often tend to bind up while you're cutting. It makes the cut really difficult. If you just keep this nearby and just give it a little swipe every once in a while like that, that is so much smoother than it was just a moment ago. Wow, we got a long way to go on this one. The base E string always takes a really long time because it's a very wide file, whereas the other files cut almost like a knife, which can get you into trouble because if you do this one first and then you get to these ones and you're used to how long this one took, you can sail right past your mark on those other ones. All right, so we're halfway there. You can feel it binding up slightly. So I got the rag right there, and now it's smooth. And we're nice and I've got that slight angle like we talked about, and we're nice and square, no roll and no yaw. You guys who fly airplanes know what I'm talking about. Roll and yaw. I don't fly airplanes, but my brother does. And when I was young, like 16 or so, he was actually my flight instructor, and I was taking flight lessons, which I never completed. So I still remember a little bit about that stuff from that. But man, that was a long time ago. So that's about all I remember. Pitch, roll, and yaw. And I use those terms a lot now whenever we're talking about this stuff. And it's very helpful in woodworking terms, especially when we're talking about adjusting things with the neck angle, because there's a lot of different angles that come into play when you're talking about your neck geometry. And if you can borrow those terms like pitch, roll, and yaw, you'll actually find that it's a little easier to conceptualize what is going on when you understand it that way, or so I have found. So even if you're not a pilot, I think it would behoove you to take a moment to look up those terms, pitch, roll, and yaw, and you'll realize that that will help you better understand when you're reading about and learning about neck angle stuff. Okay. In fact, you'll hear other people too talk about the neck pitch a lot. And when they say neck pitch, they are using that same aeronautical terminology. Okay, we are almost there on this one. I'm talking too much. It's always hard to work and talk at the same time. So what I'm doing right now, by the way, is cutting right to the top of the pencil line, which gets me really close. Essentially, I'm then the thickness of a pencil line away from where I want to be. And so then that last thickness of the pencil line will do right over the guitar and it'll go nice and quick. All right, so this file's done. We're moving over to the A string, which is our 46 in this case. So the A string on this set, I believe, is 42. I don't know if it says it right here, but I'm virtually certain it's 42. So 46 is a good choice for this. Again, the rule is the size of the string or bigger. It's fine to go a little bit bigger. And so 46 will work for a 42. All right, I'm going to place that right on the notch just like before. And we're going to start out by just going a little bit flat just to extend out my notch a little bit before I then start turning these. Now, a lot of you guys are building guitars more in a more traditional style, more Martin style, where the strings hit the nut and then they turn and splay out. And in fact, I build some guitars that way, but with my headstock design that I have right now for this guitar, here, I'll show you real quick. The strings run straight across the nut. So that's why my string slots are going straight out. But if you do have those string slots that splay, what you can do is cut these so that you have your starting point wherever you marked it, but then you turn the file to aim towards their respective tuner. If you don't do that, it's fine. A lot of guitars are like that. You can just have the strings run straight out and then turn, but it always looks kind of nice for it to meet the nut and then follow an angle through the nut to then meet the tuner. Do be careful though, because I've seen this happen many times. If you mark your string slots like we did with the string spacing ruler, and then you decide, oh, okay, I'm going to angle like Eric said, towards each tuner so that the splay of the strings more appropriately turns towards the tuner. If you place the file on the mark you just made and then turn it to an angle, well, now the front of your file where it meets, where the string length actually begins, is considerably over to the side. So once again, you will have messed up your string spacing, okay, in pursuit of something that's less important, which is just angling the strings towards the tuners. So I will say this, it's kind of a skill. I don't want people to lose, if you're a beginner to nut slotting, I don't want people to lose the forest for the trees here. You don't actually need to angle these towards the tuners, but a lot of people like to do it. But I see hobbyists all the time doing that and doing it the wrong way. And then their string spacing is radically screwed up as a result. Okay, so again, I would consider that losing the forest for the trees, because you get focused on a non-important aspect of guitar building, like angling those slots so they look more appropriate traveling towards the strings, and lose something more critical in the process. I hope that makes sense. Let's keep going. But again, here, these are just going straight across because these strings are designed to go straight over the nut. Which, by the way, if you can design your guitars that way, there is a tonal advantage to it, at least in theory, but I do think it bears out, which is that your strings are anchored directly down onto the nut. There isn't two force vectors against the nut. There's only one straight down. Now, when you have it splaying off to the side, you have the force vector pushing down against the nut, but then that's also split between the force vector that's pulling to the side. And so you're anchoring, the anchoring that you get for your string is a little sloppier. It's more split. It's split between those two vectors. And so I think it makes sense that you lose some of the direct energy transfer that you otherwise would have, which is why I like to do it this way. Paul Reed Smith, their guitars have straight pull across the nut. A bunch of other, too many to count, but have straight pull. But I just wanted to give you one iconic example, which is Paul Reed Smith. Again, I've got my oil right there. And what a difference every time. Sometimes I forget the can is there, and then when I remember and oil it up, I mean, you really notice. A little more than halfway through this one. Almost. Right there. All right, chat time. Let's see. What's going on over here, guys? All right, so he's going to think of a way to explain that side thing. I probably missed it. Are these special files? Yes, you did miss it, but that's fine. I'll explain it. These are nut slotting files, so they're gauged for the gauge of the string. Essentially, you buy a set of files and they come in certain gauges. In this case, it goes from, well, the smallest one that we use is the 13 thousandths of an inch for the treble E string, and then it goes all the way up to 56 thousandths of an inch for the bass E string. Now, you don't need a set that perfectly matches exactly the string gauge that you have, because people change strings all the time. They just need to be approximate, and each file that you use, you just have to select a file that is slightly larger, the same size or larger than your string gauge. So if you have 54 thousandths of an inch of a 54 thousandths of an inch string, anything from 54 thousandths of an inch up is going to work for that string. So, and the files that I have are from a company called Uochikyu, Uochikyu, I think. It's a Japanese company. I don't know. And they're very cheap. They're actually great files, and they're very cheap. So I actually like them more than the StuMac files. StuMac files are fine, but I'll always get these Uochikyu ones. And I know people are always trying to find cheaper files, especially if they're not really getting into guitar making. They just want to do more work on the guitars that they play. There's no reason to get these super expensive StuMac files, I think. I love you, StuMac. Keep sending me tools, please. And I probably missed it. Are these special files? Yes, we got into that. I see now. What are you looking for in notch depth? So, and we did cover that earlier too, if you want to back up the stream at some point, but I think it is helpful for other people too to hear that again. So what I did to get the notch depth is I measured with a set of feeler gauges. You need to determine the height of your fret tops and then add a small amount on top of that. And the small amount that I use is either 6 thousandths of an inch or 7 thousandths of an inch, depending on if you're, I would say if you're doing a first time nut slotting job, to give yourself a little more cushion, because you can always adjust the action later. To give yourself a little more cushion, I would do 7 or 8 thousandths of an inch, but I typically do 6 because I know I'm very comfortable with the process. I know it's going to turn out like I imagine it's going to turn out. So yeah, 6, 7 or 8 thousandths of an inch on top of the height of your fret tops. And you can determine that by taking a bunch of random feeler gauges, you put a straight edge on the first 2 frets of your guitar. So a really small straight edge, like a little card scraper would work, something small like that, as long as it's reliably straight. Place it on the first 2 frets and then see what combination of feeler gauges you can fit under that. And that will give you your height of your fret tops. And then you add the extra cushion, 6, 7 or 8 thousandths of an inch. Then you can mark that onto the face of the nut and you can cut. And then in the end, as you're going to see, unless we go too long and I have to turn off the stream, I'm going to finalize this over the guitar. So this is just the rough cut all the way across. Then I put it on the guitar and we'll do the last couple thousandths of an inch right over top of the guitar, just for a little bit of extra accuracy, as you'll see. Okay, let's get back to it. Let's do this one. I like this view. So now keep the questions coming, guys, because at this point, I'll still talk about what I'm doing, but it's very rinse and repeat. So to keep this interesting, to keep the flow going, I like having you guys add a little bit of more fodder for content here that I can deliver. If I get more questions, we can learn more things together. How does that sound? So I got my 36 thousandths of an inch file for my D string. D string, I think, is 32 thousandths of an inch for this light gauge set. So that works great. Again, I'm going to start by just cutting straight across, and then now I can tilt the file once I've established the slot. And I can always use my lovely can of Fiddlehead IPA right there. Best IPA in state of Virginia. And that's a lot of squeaking, but actually it's not binding up bad. It might sound like it is. I think that's just you're hearing the sound of end grain, because this nut is an ebony nut, like I mentioned earlier. But I've experimented with this a lot, and I actually orient the nuts if I'm using a wood nut, which is kind of rare for me. Usually I use bone, but sometimes, usually for aesthetic reasons, I find that you can use an ebony nut, and especially if you orient the way that you cut it so that you have end grain on the top surface. Now the material has to be really good. You can't take it off the end of a board where there's lots of checking or anything like that, because the risk you run with having the end grain oriented like this is you do have short grain running across the width of the nut. And so if you have a really weak piece of wood, in theory at least, when you tune it up, you can just crack the nut along a weak grain line. But I've never seen that happen, and I have some very old guitars that are more than a decade old with ebony nuts, and they're great guitars. And what I get out of orienting the end grain up on the top surface is a very hard wear surface that's not going to wear down from repeatedly tuning and down tuning the strings. So I'm a fan of it. All right. I'm just curious, how far are we into the stream? Yeah, we started at 8, a little before 8 actually, and it's almost 10:30. This is great. And we'll just keep going. All right, so this one's almost there. And you can see, I know I'm talking a lot, so that slows things down, but you can see how much quicker the D string went than, say, the E string, because I'm already there right now. All right, so now I'm going to do the G string. One little thing about the G string is, I don't know if you guys have ever noticed this, but when you're giving a setup on a guitar, and let's say you go a little bit too far. What is the string that always buzzes first? It's not 100% true, but just in your experience. In fact, if you want to post it in the comments there. Although I kind of gave it away because I started out my line of questioning with talking about the G string. So it's the G string. So I always notice the G string buzzes first. I'm not sure exactly why. I mean, it is the highest tension string. I don't know if that would be the reason. It's the only treble string that's wound as well. So it has a material difference that might affect the way that the pattern it generates when you pluck it, right? How much of an elliptical or even a parabolic pattern it has. So a string can have more of an elliptical pattern or more of a parabolic pattern depending on how flexible the string material is. Whole nother deep thing, we don't have to go there. The point is, regardless of why it's the first one to buzz, I just always notice that it is. If you notice that though, then that might lead you to conclude that, oh, when I'm doing a setup, maybe I just leave that string, or not even a setup, when I'm making a nut. What if we just leave that string the tiniest amount higher, 1/1000th of an inch, 2/1000ths of an inch, something like that? So that's what I do. One thing you can do, you can either eyeball it in, which is kind of more so what I do. I just stop a little bit shorter of where we're going with the G string, just leave a tiny bit more. Or if you just want to kind of guarantee it, you can take, here, I have one right here. You can just keep a really small feeler gauge, 1 or 2 thousandths of an inch off to the side. And when you get to the G string, just add this to your stack. And then when you're done the G string, take it out. Boom. There you go. You created that little extra cushion for what I think is the most problematic string. Now you can actually effectively have your action lower than you otherwise would be able to get it because you eked that G string up just slightly. There's a hot tip for you guys. I think some of you guys will appreciate that one. That one I think really sort of revolutionized my setup work. But I don't actually have to leave a little bit more on the G string at this stage. Again, we're just roughing these in. So I'm going to go right to the line. This is everything I just said, adding that 1/1000th of an inch. I worry about that when we get to when we put this over the guitar and we do the final cuts right over the guitar. So this guitar, like I mentioned earlier, I am going to be installing pickups on this one. They are K&K Pure Minis, which I've installed on a couple other guitars at this point, 4 guitars, I think, and I really like them. Normally, I would never install pickups on a non-commissioned guitar, which this is. So let me explain my terms here first. When I say a non-commissioned guitar, what I mean is, we're all kind of familiar with this because we all probably do it if you're a guitar maker. We build guitars, ideally for commission because then you're getting money for that guitar. But then also you just build guitars that you want to build. It's not for you, like you have to make money ultimately. I'm not just doing it for fun, but although it is fun. But you're building these guitars to like sort of fill out your portfolio to showcase what you're capable of, and hopefully to sell as just for what the guitar is. Those guitars are always harder to sell, which is why you can't go nuts and just only build those types of guitars. The reason they're hard to sell is not because they're not great guitars, it's because they're too specific. Like if you determine all the parameters of the guitar, someone's going to come along and they're probably going to love it, but they're going to be like, oh, I love this. Can you do this for a dreadnought? Can you do this with a Brazilian rosewood instead of whatever, bullshit wood that you chose? Anyway, there's people who are shopping for boutique guitars, they want the customization. So even if they love the guitar that you built, that guitar is probably just like a business card for the commission that you get from them. It's kind of a bummer because you want to sell that guitar. You've already put the work into it. You'd rather sell it, of course. So with all that said, getting back to pickups, I should work while I talk. Getting back to pickups, generally speaking, I've always agreed with the sort of conventional wisdom that for a high-end boutique guitar, you shouldn't put pickups in them, acoustic guitar, of course. You shouldn't put pickups in them because the pickups are highly specific to the individual. Some people won't want any pickups in their guitar, and even if they do, they will probably want a certain type of pickup. However, I am sort of breaking the mold on this guitar, breaking the rules a little bit, so to speak, and I'm just going to add pickups. Part of the reason is simply that I just want to, and I want a guitar to have at a show that I can actually plug in, because I do notice there are some players at these shows who really they are looking for something out of the box with pickups that they can just buy and not have to have a luthier install pickups after the fact. Of course, the risk you run is, again, they might love your guitar, but not like the pickups that you chose. But again, that's just a risk. You got to pick what you like and go with it if you're going to do that sort of thing. But most of the time, you shouldn't install pickups. Now, the other reason I'm doing it on this guitar specifically is because, in fact, I might start doing this on all my parlor guitars, because a parlor guitar is just a totally different beast. It's if you have a high-end boutique, let's say orchestra model guitar or even a dreadnought, those guitars are more optimized for live playing and recording with. They have excellent balance and the complex character to them. A parlor guitar is a big compromise in the other direction. You're getting like a very small child-sized guitar. I'm not saying it's for children. I actually think they're super fun to play. But I mean, it's like noticeably smaller guitar, very comfortable to carry and to hold while you're playing. Different feel, different tonal characteristics. But those tonal characteristics are definitely less complex because they're brighter. You don't have the depth in the bass. So a parlor guitar, I think, is easier to add just sort of any out of the box pickups to, and it will be easy to pick up that tone because the tone is not complex, if that makes sense. It's more about the projection and the immediacy of the notes and less about the long ringing overtones on a very small bodied guitar like a parlor. So I think my parlors from now on, who knows, maybe I'll change my mind in a week, but I think I'm going to install pickups on them, all of them. I have two other ones that are already done that are, here at the shop. I think I'm going to install pickups on those ones too. And I'll do the K&K Pure Minis. Oh, I'm there. Okay, should stop using this. All right, 17 thousandths of an inch. That'll work for our 16 thousandths of an inch B string. Now we're getting into the territory of hyper thin files that potentially snap in your hand while you're cutting. I mean, if you're careful, if you're aware of the risk, it's not a big problem. And the oil definitely helps because the way that they snap is you're going too fast and they bind up in the channel and flex and then break. Let me peek at the chat for a second. All right, makes sense, makes sense. Have you used ebony for the saddle as well, Tom Casty? Yes, I have. Let me think. Yeah, on two different guitars. I have both of them in the house. Yeah, it works fun. I don't, by the way, in the saddle, I will say, don't try and do the end grain standing up. Saddle's way too thin to handle that short grain. You have to have the grain running straight across the saddle. And it is what it is. You don't need, the saddle doesn't wear as much as the nut does from tuning and retuning. So it's fine to not use end grain. Are you bringing, yes, I am. I am bringing this guitar to the show. I shouldn't say these things because, whatever. I'm always wrong, but it has to be done by this Saturday. There's almost nothing left to do to it. I guess this is a knock on wood type of thing. Fortunately, there's a lot of wood in here. You should try the nut file backer from Stu Mac for the thin files. That's a good idea. Yeah, Actually, I like that. I don't feel that I'm just so I don't break the. I should just to clarify. I haven't broke one of these files. I broke. No, actually, I never broke one of these files. I was going to say I broke one in the early days, but that was also somebody else who was using my files. I think I got used to these early on and realized that they flex a lot, and I've never broken one. So I don't want people to, just based on his comment there, I don't want people to think that you need to buy those backers for these files, because I actually don't think you do. If you understand the problem, they don't break. The problem for me is I have students in here all the time. I teach, it's a good time to talk about my classes. I teach an 8-day workshop where students come in for 8 days and we build a fully strung up, fully playable, completed guitar, start to finish in the 8 days right here in the shop. We're working like 10 hours a day to get this done, but we get it done. There's only 3 students in the class, and I have several classes coming up in the fall. EricSchaeferGuitars.com. You can see the schedule of dates for those classes. We get into all this stuff there and more. I've had, over 100 students have come out from all over the world and taken this class at this point. So anyway, the students, the students break the file. It's their fault. That's why I said all that. Okay. Can you explain more about what you just meant by the saddle grain? Oh, well, that was simply, I don't want to confuse you, but earlier I was talking about on the nut, when I use a wood nut, I orient the grain so the grain is on the top surface that the string bears against. End grain is far harder than any other grain orientation, like side grain. And so I like to have the end grain facing up. One, because it's fine to do it that way. The nut's not going to break in my experience from the short grain of the wood. It's not going to break. And as long as you're using an appropriately stable wood, and ebony works for that. On the saddle, though, the saddle is so much thinner than the nut that I wouldn't try to do that. That was all I was explaining. I wouldn't do the same thing I did with the nut. I just cut a blank out with the grain running lengthwise like you normally would for anything, right? That's all. Don't overthink that. Just if you're doing a wood saddle, don't overthink it. Just cut out a piece with regular long grain. I took Eric's workshop a few years ago. I did not break a file. Good job. Yeah, and everyone doesn't. There's just, I think we've broken 4 files at this point, and it's always the E or the B string, the treble ones, of course. And often they're still usable. So if you're watching this and you did take my course and break a file, I don't hate you. It's fine. In fact, what you end up with when you break one of these is just 2 smaller files. So it's not even like the end of the world. I typically don't even order a new file because I don't really need to. The next student just gets a smaller file. So it's his problem. Okay, let's get back to it. We got to get some stuff done here, guys. All right, where was I? B string. Oil that up. And away we go. I break the file right now after all that. Bet you guys thought that was me breaking the file right there. All right, we're almost there. I have a little bit of an angle on this one, but it's not a big deal. Which again, if you have a little, so when I say angle in this case, I'm talking about roll. This one's a little rolled, and it might be yawed that way too, slightly. But that's pretty slight, so I'm not even worried about it. Here's a little micro thing to watch out for with this, which I see a lot people doing, is what I call the victory swipe at the end. Okay, so you're cutting your nut slot. You're cutting at a slight angle like the 15-degree headstock angle that we have. It's a good angle to cut at. So I'm cutting at that slight angle, which you can see on this camera, right? And then right at the last second, because we all grew up, not all of us, but most of us grew up playing baseball, or if not baseball, maybe you play golf now, and everyone's learned about follow through. Our whole lives, almost everything we do, especially if it's sports, the concept of like swinging through something is common, and people, I think, bring that into woodworking, which is an area where the opposite is true. We don't want follow through in almost everything. In fact, a skill to learn with woodworking is to actually be able to have a firm start and stop to your stroke, rather than this like lollygagging around, like kind of swinging, arcing stroke, right? It's something I find them often trying to like train out of people with the work that I do, especially with the workshops. But in this case, here's where I see it is people are carving, and then when they get to the bottom of the line, they go like this, carving away. They like swipe it out. It's instinctual. Like they're not even thinking about it, and they do this kind of victory swipe. And what you do at the end, if you think about it, you were following that angle, and then right at the end, so there's only a tiny bit of wood up at the peak of that angle, right? And if you then turn the file in that victory swipe and go like this, you actually can very easily push the file back like a 32nd of an inch, or not the file back, push the peak back a 32nd of an inch, just from that, even that single stroke at the end where you victory swipe it. Okay, so don't victory swipe. Don't do that. All right, almost there. So firm stop. See that? Firm stop. Just something to get habituated to so that you get that into your muscle memory, not just with nut slotting, but really with everything in woodworking. Firm stop. I'm over exaggerating the pause at the end of the stop here just to make the point. Slightly more, and then we're there. There we go. All right, one more, the thinnest of files, but I don't see it. There it is. Pulled it out because I was talking about it. Oh, we got Hofmeister guitars. Yeah, so Aiden Hofmeister in the chat. Aiden took my class. What was that? 2020, right, Aiden? I believe. And now Aiden makes amazing guitars. If you check out his website, Hofmeister Guitars. I'm not sure what the .com is or whatever, but his brand is Hofmeister Guitars. And he goes, just like I was talking about going to a guitar show, he goes to guitar shows now, and he's crushing it out there. So he writes, "Good morning, Eric. When chatting with Bob Taylor at NAMM," wow, you talked to Bob Taylor at NAMM. He explained that currently the music industry, aka Nashville, only really accepts two styles of pickups, K and LR Bragg's Anthem. Well, that is great to hear, man. I love hearing stuff like that because I didn't know that, and of course that's one man's opinion, but it's Bob Taylor's opinion, so he understands the industry, and that's great because honestly, I don't know a hell of a lot about pickups. I'm kind of not in that world. You know, I build strictly acoustic guitars, and typically I don't even put pickups on them. So I'm glad I landed on the K in that case instead of something else. I have used the LR Bragg's, actually Anthem, exactly that one as well. And so maybe that's why, maybe they're just the two most visible, popular ones, but those are the only two that I've used, thankfully, because apparently that's what the industry accepts. Very good to know. Good piece of information. Thanks, man. Username handle as a classical player. Why is that? As a classical player. Okay, so he's asking Hofmeister as a classical player. Why is that? K is my favorite. So Hofmeister writes K is my favorite because it is very minimal and requires no battery. Oh yes, absolutely. I hate batteries in everything. Last thing I want is for any reason my guitar to have a battery somewhere on it. Batteries are I mean, it's just something you're always changing, and it's just the weakest point of failure on anything. Yeah, I can't stand batteries. So couldn't agree more with that. Okay, I feel like I saw a question in here. Hold on, give me 1 second. No, I think that's okay. All right, I'm gonna leave you guys alone for a bit and get back to work. All right, so we got 13 thousandths of an inch for our 12 thousandths of an inch string. This thing is like a floppy fish. But again, if you understand that, it's not terribly hard to use. And like someone in the chat mentioned, you can get those little nut file holders that StewMac sells, or even the StewMac files aren't floppy like this. But again, just giving my opinion, I still love these files. I don't know why. I think I just don't like the tapered shape of other files. And I'm fine with the fact that they're hyper thin. All right, give that a little oil. So I think installing those pickups is what I'm going to be doing next on this guitar, the K&K Pure Minis. The Pure Minis are definitely the most minimal pickup I've seen, and that's why I gravitated towards them. Again, no battery, no onboard electronics, which I think they have a version. What's it called? It's not called the Pure Mini. It's like, I don't know, the K&K Classic or something like that, that has control knobs that you would install onto the side of the guitar. I feel like at that point, you're risking devaluing the boutique value of the guitar and turning it into more of a market commodity kind of guitar. Now, of course, you might have a customer who just wants that, but they can always ask for that and you can install it after the fact. We're basically there. Like I said, these ones, the small files cut like a knife, so they get down there real quick. Okay. Yeah, these two strings, I can see I had a slight yaw to the left on them. That's okay. As you'll see, everything's very obvious right now because the nut is oversized. It's still very tall. As you'll see, when this gets fully shaped and sanded down, or you probably won't see because we'll be done the stream by then. But as I'll see, this you won't notice that any slight discrepancies in the end. And I just want to mention that because when you're doing this yourself, you might feel a little bit frustrated by the difficulty of holding your hand straight and everything. I don't worry about it too much as long as I'm reasonably straight. I know that everything works out looking and functioning great. Okay, as long as I'm not completely asleep at the wheel and I don't have an extreme roll or an extreme yaw to my angle. Okay, so now this can go on the guitar. And you know what I'm going to do? We are well into this, guys. I'm going to explain what I'm going to do next, and then we're just going to chat for a little bit. We can ask some questions or whatever, and we'll close it off there. We're not closing right now. Don't leave. I'm going to explain, and then we're going to do some Q&A, and that's going to be fun. But I'm not going to continue to file away while you guys watch. Got to keep it entertaining here. So clear a little space, bring the guitar back over for this explanation. So we are now most of the way. Where did I put the nut? That's right underneath. All right, so we are now most of the way down to our line. You might even be able to see this on the camera. If I tilt it a little bit, maybe the light catches the line, maybe not. So I cut these right down to the top of the pencil line. It's literally touching the pencil line. And now I'm going to load this up in here. Let me move the guitar over a little bit. I'm going to load this up, put the strings on there. And with that in there, I'm just going to rest it on top right now. There it is. This guy. So remember our feeler gauge set from earlier? This is the height of the fret tops plus 0.006 of an inch. So now with the nut in there we go. All right. I just figured for the sake of talking about this, it would be easier if you could see the nut at least in place there. Okay. So with the nut in there, we're going to place feeler gauge set underneath the strings. And I'm literally going to hold it here, giving slight pressure at the wings. So at these wings of it, the feeler gauge set, so that it actually conforms to the radius. I don't just want to leave it sitting here because it'll flex upward and it'll be flat instead of following the radius. So I'm going to press down slightly. It'll follow that radius. And then just one at a time, I take this string out, take the appropriate file, and I'm going to cut, still maintaining that roughly 15-degree angle. I'm going to cut right down to the metal. I don't want to actually hit the metal, but I want to cut right down to it. And you can actually do a really accurate job with this strictly because, or specifically because, the feeler gauges are made of shiny reflective metal. So here's why that's important. And we find the shine. Some of these are a little rusty and so they don't reflect as much. But here, I would use this side facing up because it's nice and shiny. If I'm looking down at the slot like this, I can actually see a mirror image of the nut slot in reflecting in the metal. And so what that means is, ordinarily, if this wasn't reflective, there would be a certain amount of material that I'd be watching as I'm cutting. I'd be watching that material to come down and just barely reach the feeler gauge set, and then I would stop and I would know that I'm there. But because I'm looking at the actual nut slot and a reflection of the nut slot, what I'm seeing is that amount of material that I'm cutting is effectively doubled because I'm seeing it in real life and I'm seeing the reflection of it, right? And so as I'm cutting, it's like my vision is 2x'd because I'm watching a doubling, a mirror image of it being cut. Okay, a little weird to explain, but I think in practice, when you do it, you'll see, oh, I see what he's saying. It's like I can see that much better, and so I'll be twice as accurate as if I was just, cutting to like a material that's not reflective, right? If I didn't have a reflection. So that's why I love this feeler gauge set method. I think this is, I could be, I don't know why I think this, but I think this is like a Don McCrosty thing. He was a guy that worked with he did a lot with Dan Earlywine, friend of Dan Earlywine's. I think he wrote some things in the guitar repair manual, or at the very least, he influenced a lot of Dan Earlywine stuff. So anyway, I think this was a Don McCrosty method with the feeler gauges. So that's what I would do now. And this is the point, by the way, where see the G string right here? Here, I'm going to mark it so I don't forget. I'm going to leave the G string just a hair high for the reason I mentioned earlier, which is that I know from practical experience, anecdotal experience, that whenever I'm lowering action, especially on, setups and repairs for other guitars, I always find that the G string, if I go slightly too far, it's always the G string that buzzes first, almost always. And so with that in mind, it's a good idea to just leave like 1/1000th of an inch or 2/1000ths of an inch higher on the G string. I always do that. All right, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that off camera, but let's, we don't have to close this up right away. If you guys want to talk for a little bit and then we'll close it up, that'd be cool. So let's see what we got in the chat here. And Tom Cassidy says, I'm not sure if fingerstyle players are exclusively using K or bags. Isn't it Brags, by the way, or am I wrong? I think Aiden initially wrote bags and now we're all calling it bags. I'm going to look that up. Maybe I'm wrong. LR Brags. Just bags. That's weird. I like always thought that was LR Brags. Okay, I'm wrong. Not sure. Okay, I've got a better explanation. I think which model of John J. Long says which model of K&K. I don't know if he's asking them or me, but for me, what I have and what I'm using here is the Pure Minis. It's the simplest, most minimal one. I think the other ones they have either are the same thing with onboard electronics, like little, knob volume and tone knobs, which just makes it less minimal. So I don't like that. And then the other one I think is for, I think they have other ones just for different types of instruments. Like for a 12 string, I think they have one with more transducers. This one, the K&K Pure Mini, only has 3 transducers for a 6 string. Okay, by the way, if you guys like what I do and you get a little something out of the lessons that I teach, hold on, let's see if I can do this quickly. There we go. Out of the lessons that I teach, go to ericschaferguitars.com. There you will see the schedule of dates for my 8-day guitar building workshops. I talked about those a little bit earlier. It's an 8-day workshop where you come out and you build a flat top acoustic guitar with me. We get into all of this geeky stuff, the kind of stuff we got into here, except you're actually here, you're doing it with the tools. Everything's provided, the materials are provided, everything. There are even some options for customizing the materials, but you have to do that ahead of time if you're interested. And it costs more to customize the materials, but that's expected. So ericschaferguitars.com. Check that out. We'd love to have you out here. And you can also find on my website the online guitar building school, over 60 full-length instructional videos going into all this stuff. Rather than trying to piece things together through random YouTube videos, you can take a structured course to build your own guitars at home. Many of the people we talk to in here are members of that course itself. and also prior students of the hands-on workshop. Okay, and the tone wood shop, by the way, is now live. That's now something I do. I do sell some tone woods. Tom Casti was talking about them earlier. He's bought some tone woods from here. We've got Wengi, Western Red Cedar, some really highly figured super flake Spessart oak, which is just a very interesting like showpiece kind of wood. And we've got Tasmanian blackwood, black walnut, Clara walnut. Check it out, EricSchaeferGuitars.com. All right. Do we have anything else in the chat? I can keep going, guys. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. Let's see. Stu Mack actually sells a safe slot nut guard that is a set of feeler gauges and a neck call to bend the feeler gauges like you're talking about. Not necessary, but makes it easier. Yeah. So I think he's talking about the same. Oh, nut guard as a set of feeler gauges. Oh, I see. Yeah, I know what he's talking about. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I have no experience with that. It might just work kind of the same, or it might be easier to use. I have to look into that just out of curiosity. But I'm very comfortable with the way I'm doing things. So I always like something new to try. Hofmeister Guitars. I believe the Pure Mini has 3 transducers and is for steel string. K&K Classic has 4 and is for nylon string. Yes, so that's what it's for nylon. There we go. Okay. I wonder why you would want 4 transducers. Someone who does classical guitars would know the answer to this, I think. I wonder why it's more necessary for the nylon to have the 4 transducers. Okay. Oh, looks like username handle here. Great name. Finally has a more clean question here from earlier. Not clean like it was explicit, but clean as in more comprehensible. Acoustic build sides were made by cutting ash into segments 5-inch long, 3.5-inch wide, ½ inch thick, straight little blocks. We glued the segments together to roughly shape the shape we wanted. So instead of bending sides to form, these pieces were glued to roughly match the form. FYI, teardrop mandolin style form. You're left with a big blocky frame of the sides. Yep, and almost like piecing together a picture frame. Okay, I get what you're saying. Except instead of 4 sides, it was a strange octagonish shape. By how this was taken by how some DIY banjos were made. Okay, so yeah, it's like more of it's a way of getting around bending, right? Although if you're able to bend, like that sounds like a lot more work, and it is. But yeah, for someone who doesn't have like a side bending machine, for example, which those are crazy expensive and or difficult to build yourself. So yeah, you could do it that way. I'm trying to remember your question from earlier, I believe, was the thickness of the sides. And so you're really asking then the spirit of your question is, are the sides appropriately thick for tonal reasons? I was taking it as, are the sides too thick to bend, which 5 to 8 millimeters is way too thick to bend. Here's the thing. Yeah, he's saying, do my sides need to be a certain thickness? Have I made a terrible mistake in this construction method? Well, you haven't made a terrible mistake. I would imagine the guitar is going to look at the very least unconventional and like, I'm not picking on it. It's just going to look blocky. And whenever someone sees sides that aren't bent, and I've seen this before, you can't help but think, oh, this is someone trying to get around bending, right? Because almost clearly, like if you could bend the sides just as easily, you would rather do that because if only for the way that it looks. Like it's so smooth and seamless to have this nice flowing, the grain just following the curves of the side. It has this very like natural, feminine kind of shape to it. Everyone desires that. And then you look at a guitar where it's like kind of blocky shaped. It's just not going to appeal to a lot of people. Like, I mean, you might love it because it's your baby, but like, it's just not going to be that appealing to a lot of people. But that's all visual stuff. As far as is it going to function? Yeah, it'll hold. It's not going to fall apart, assuming you know that your joinery is good. And as far as the tone, here's the thing. You actually don't need the sides to be thin for tone. In fact, you want them to be rigid and thick. So it's actually, if anything, it's a good thing. Now, at some point, if they're like stupid thick, like ½ inch or something, now the guitar is physically heavy and it weighs a lot, which is going to affect the tone and obviously just the feel. Like there's a certain discomfort to a physically heavy guitar. So that's something to consider, but tonally, you actually want the sides to be as stiff as they can be. Stiffness is your friend there. Whereas on the top and the back, we're trying to create, we're trying to allow for mobility of the top and mobility of the back plate so that they can respond to the string signal. The sides, we don't want to respond to the string signal. A common mistake is to not respect that fact and leave the sides super thin or maybe unbraced and end up with sides that are mobile and responsive along with the top and the back. And now, rather than having the top and the back play off of each other like an efficient air pump, because the sides couple the top and the back together, okay? They're the coupler. If they're rigid, they'll be a good coupler, so the top and the back can play off of each other. If they're mobile, just like the top and the back, well, now the whole thing, there's so much loss of energy. The whole thing is like a piece of jello, just chaotically and randomly moving in all directions. I'm trying to, it's not, doesn't work exactly like that. I'm trying to paint a picture for you of why you don't want the sides to be resonant, thin, and mobile. You only want the top and the back to be that way. So I don't see any problem with what you're doing as far as making the sides too thick for resonance. The only problem I see, as I mentioned, is one, visual, and two, just literal heft. The guitar will be physically heavy for the player, which can also affect tone and obviously feel. Okay, let's see. Completely agree visually, and yeah, I'll need to remove some mass. I was worried you were going to say that sounds like a horrible idea. You should start over. No, no, no. So I'm glad I'm not cooked. No, you're not cooked, man. You're not cooked. I think that's cool. It's cool to do. It's cool to do fun stuff like that. I've seen some really creative stuff done like that. And honestly, it can, if you're a real artist, like you can do you can not bend sides and do something and have it look even better than bent sides, but that requires being like some visionary kind of guy. Very often it doesn't look visionary. Gotcha. Yeah, the jello with the ping pong ball analogy. Yep. Okay. All right. And he says, thank you. Okay, in all caps. I love that. All right. Well, thank you. Not him, but all of you. Thank you for tuning in. This was a long one. This was fun. I didn't know how this was going to go because I figured we're just going to get started. We're going to get into stuff. We're going to bounce around and just cover different topics. But yeah, we're done. That's it for today. You guys are the best. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for sticking around, and bye for now.